All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to Agile DevOps DFW, our first daytime event. We've got a lot of content, not enough events to share the content, which is a nice problem to have. And so we've started increase the frequency of our events to twice a month. And this is the first event in our daytime series. So welcome to everyone. My name is Ravi Verma. Today we are here to talk about 10 reasons why sprint reviews suck. And we're going to share some real world tips, real world techniques we've used with our real world clients that have completely turned around their sprint reviews and increased the value they get from sprint reviews. All right. So let's start with a little bit of information on Agile DevOps DFW. I created this meetup with a couple of my friends, Victor James and Jeff Olson, many years ago, 2014, coming up to 6 years now. We wanted to explore interconnections between Agile and DevOps. Always looking for speakers, especially DevOps speakers. So if you're interested in speaking or know someone who might be a good fit for our meetup, send them our way. Little bit about our company, Smooth Apps. We have a bunch of partners who are all Scrum.org professional Scrum trainers. Our partners are distributed throughout the world. There are about maybe 325 professional Scrum trainers now. So chances are, no matter where you might be, no matter what your footprint is, if you need if you want to work with Smooth Apps, we'll find an awesome trainer and a coach for all of your geographic locations. Got tons of free content on our website. Just posted one of my most popular blogs, the Professional Scrum Product Owner Job Description. We've got a bunch of videos. I think one of our most popular videos was 4 Signs You Are Too Modern for Agile. Got a bunch of free presentations and webinars. This is one of our recent webinars on how can you measure the ROI of Agile training, coaching, and consulting. How can we drink our own dog champagne, have acceptance criteria for training, coaching, consulting, and how can we empirically measure and manage the ROI of Agile training, coaching, consulting. So we've got a bunch of free content on our website. And if you want to learn about our upcoming events, and if you want to learn about new content as we post it, follow us on LinkedIn, and that way you can be plugged in. Little bit about a cause that I'm really passionate about. A few years ago, I co-founded Agile for Patriots with my friend Greg Gomel. And what we are committed to doing is to giving back to U.S. military veterans and military spouses. So what we do is we provide free Agile training, coaching, mentoring to our veterans and military spouses. How can you help? So if you want to give back to our military veterans and spouses, some ways you could contact me or Janie, and we would love to schedule you for just a brief 5 to 7 minute lightning talk to our graduates. You could do a Q&A. No need to present any slides. Just show up and answer whatever questions you can. You can do some workshops or presentations. You can offer internships in your company, job opportunities, or just shadowing opportunities. Or if you want, you can donate at agileforpatriots.org. So if you share a passion to give back to people who have given a lot to our country, would love to partner with you. All right, so that's about Agile for Patriots. Let's talk about logistics. So Pete is saying, where is the darn mute button? It's possible that you may not see a darn mute button. It's possible that it's likely that everybody is in listen only mode. So I would still like to hear from you. Use the chat panel, and Steve and I are going to be monitoring the chat panel, and we'll take questions either along the way or at the end as time permits. All right. So that's a little bit about the logistics. So with that said, let's dive into our presentations, 10 reasons why sprint reviews suck. I'm joined by my partner in crime, Steve Talent. Steve specializes in helping clients mostly in the area of product ownership and how we can, eat our own dog food, drink our own dog champagne, and apply empirical techniques to measure the efficacy of not only agile training, coaching, consulting, but agile product delivery. Steve recently got certified by the ROI Institute. It's a I would say, world-renowned institute on measuring the ROI of training, coaching, consulting. And he has been integrating those techniques into his product ownership coaching. All right, so that's a little bit about Steve. I've got about 21 years in the IT industry. I'm a Scrum.org professional Scrum trainer and the founder at Smooth Apps. All right. So last webinar, about 2 weeks ago, Steve and I co-presented this webinar, 10 Ingredients for Tasty Sprint Reviews. This webinar is a sequel to that webinar. So if you haven't watched that webinar, that's okay. We have the recording on our YouTube channel. If you find this interesting after the session is over, go take a look at that webinar. In that webinar, what we did was we introduced 10 key prerequisites that we have found to be lacking at many of our client organizations. 10 key prerequisites which are needed for effective sprint reviews. And so we went through these 10, and today we are going to zoom in to ingredient number 7, which is the lack of a structure, the lack of a flow for a sprint review. So that's how this webinar ties in to the previous webinar. All right, so let's dive in. So most of our clients who hire us for helping them with agile enablement for Scrum adoption, usually we will do some kind of a quick intro to Scrum. We give them a quick overview. Many clients attend the Scrum.org Professional Scrum Foundations as a starter to experience Scrum, not only understand it theoretically. And then we also give them a bunch of self-help resources. So at Scrum.org, we have partnered with our trainers across the world, and we have a playlist that talks about the Scrum principles and values, Scrum roles, Scrum artifacts, events, and activities. And you can get all of these videos. There are about 23 videos in this series. They're all curated videos. I personally recruited or selected each of these videos, and they are from a reliable source. They're from Scrum.org, the home of Scrum. So we leave these videos to with our clients so people can refer to them and refresh their knowledge of the fundamentals. And then we explain to them where the sprint review fits into the overall big picture, the big picture of Scrum. And this is how we establish the foundation of sprint reviews. And we remind them that the sprint review is not just a demo. That is a common misunderstanding about sprint reviews. Demo is definitely an essential part of the sprint review, but it's not the be-all, end-all of sprint review. So we remind our clients that, like every other event of Scrum, the sprint review is an opportunity for transparency, inspection, and adaptation. So what we are really doing is we are trying to crowdsource all the stakeholders that are attending the sprint review, and we are trying to tap into their collective wisdom and figure out what can we together as a team comprising of the Scrum team and the stakeholders, figure out what can we glean about what's going on in the past, what is going on in the present, most importantly, the adaptation. How can we crowdsource this wisdom so that we can change the future? How can we change our product backlog, which will feed in directly to the next sprint planning, right? And why? Why do we care? Ken Schwaber taught me when I attended the Scrum.org ESM class in Boston many years ago. Most businesses care about 3 things, one or all of 3 things. They want to maximize value. Maybe it's top line revenue, engage customers, profit, EBITDA. They want to minimize waste, and they want to manage risk exposure, right? So the intent of a sprint review is to try and create measurable improvements in these dimensions through the act of adapting the product backlog. All right, so we provide this context. Now, here's what happens next. There are some clients for whom this is enough. We give this overview and they're off to the races. They have enough context and they start having effective sprint reviews. Awesome. There are other clients who are, some of who are confused. They say, look, Ravi, in the Scrum.org PSF class, we did a sprint review in the case study. It made perfect sense, but now I come back to the real world and what made so much sense in the training context doesn't make sense in the real context, real world context. So can you help us? Other people go ahead and they have a sprint review, but then it degenerates into a food fight, right? Because there's a lot of conflict. People are unaware or unaccustomed to sprint reviews. They don't know how to behave, and there's a lot of pent-up frustration, and the sprint review acts as almost like a pressure cooker where all the pressure is getting released, all the pent-up pressure, and it's not very constructive, okay? So if you fall in the first category where you know enough about sprint reviews, you have effective sprint reviews, this presentation, this webinar is not for you. However, if you are in either of these other two categories, your organization or your client organizations are a little bit confused, or the sprint reviews are degenerating into some kind of a food fight, then I think you'll get value out of this session, all right? Some caveats, there's a lot of content here. This is not a workshop, this is not a training course. We barely have 30 to 40 minutes of presentation time here, and then to leave time for Q&A. So I want to set your expectations. There's a lot of content. We won't have time to dive into every single element here, but what can you do? What you can do is, I want you to be aware that this content builds upon a foundation that we have built for all our clients who have been successful in using this content. And two key elements of the foundation are the Smooth Apps Scrum Team Quick Launch. This is where we level set all members of the Scrum team and key stakeholders into what, in terms of what is Scrum, what is agility, usually includes the Scrum.org Professional Scrum Foundations course. And then we have a boot camp to launch the Scrum team. The second aspect of the foundation is the Smooth Apps Product Owner Playbook. So what we typically do is we do a Scrum.org PSPO workshop, and then we do a boot camp where we walk the product owner and key members of the team through the product owner playbook, and we establish a solid foundation for product ownership. So this presentation is going to use some techniques from the Smooth Apps Scrum Team Quick Launch and the product owner playbook. We don't have time to explain all of these techniques to you, but if you find any of these interesting, contact us and we'll see if we can organize these boot camps for you. All right. So let's talk about barriers. I want to ask you a question. As you look at sprint reviews in your context, current company, past company or clients, what has been the single biggest barrier to having an effective sprint review that results in course correction? So I'll give you maybe 30 seconds and I'll be monitoring the chat panel. Can you share stream of consciousness responses? Single biggest barrier to having effective sprint reviews. What have you seen? All right, I'm starting to see some answers. All right. Aditya was saying one of the biggest concerns is misunderstanding about the purpose of sprint review. Pete says the stakeholders don't show up or the wrong stakeholders show up. Hugh's feedback is we got to keep everyone on track. Pete's concern is sometimes they can be too long or too detailed. Martin saying sprint review gets hijacked by the stakeholders who try to turn it into a planning session. And then Hugh is new to Scrum, so here to learn. So these are some very common challenges, and we faced pretty much all of these challenges, and we try to address some of these in today's webinar. So let's talk about the top challenges that Steve and I have found across multiple clients. Challenge number one, what the heck is this sprint review you speak of, and why am I here, right? Chances are your stakeholders do not have the time or inclination or interest to attend any agile training. They may not attend any Scrum training, and they show up at a sprint review and they have no context. So that's one challenge. Sorry about that. Give me 1 second. The second challenge is there is no kind of code of conduct. How am I supposed to behave such that the organization maximizes value from this event? It's usually a fairly expensive meeting in terms of time and money, but people come into the meeting with mismatched and misaligned expectations of how to behave. Challenge number three, reason number three why a sprint review sucks. The dev team often directly jumps into the bits and bytes. They start demoing the features, maybe sometimes they even, in some cases, start demoing data or looking at database tables or XMLs, but they dive directly at such a low level that we miss the woods for the trees. We don't establish the context of the overall product. What is this product all about? Who are we trying to serve? And then we need to establish the context and the tie-in with the sprint. Many times we don't explain how this sprint goal ties into the overall roadmap. So again, people zoom in at the microscopic level without understanding how it ties into the macroscopic level. All right. It's hard to get feedback from people if we don't do a good enough job of explaining to them how does this sprint impact their life. So what happens is if we don't address this, people are on their cell phone, they're distracted, and they are nodding their heads because they have not connected the dots between how does this impact their team. And usually the people who are most detached or disconnected or distracted will be shouting the loudest when they realize, oh crap, this sprint deployed something to production, it broke my department, or it broke something that the customer was counting on. I'm getting calls. Why didn't you tell me about this? So you have to explain to people, look, this is likely going to make a huge impact to you, and we have blind spots. I really need you to be dialed in, right? One of the other biggest challenges is we don't pause to look at the multi-sprint trends. So if you're trying to course correct and provide meaningful feedback to the team on what course corrections they should make in the next sprint planning, if we don't pause and take a multi-sprint view of how the market is reacting to our product, it's so hard to give meaningful feedback about where the product should go next. So we don't evaluate multi-sprint product trends. Sometimes we don't have candid conversations about impediments and how the stakeholders might themselves be contributing to the impediments that are preventing us from delivering value. Or we don't have crucial conversations about risks. What can go wrong? What are we doing to manage those risks? And how can you help us? The other thing is Agile and Scrum is a new way of being. Often it's very different from the traditional way of being. And there are some members of the team who are sticking their neck out in the face of tremendous cynicism, resistance, perhaps even ridicule, when the new way of being contradicts the traditional way of being. So if you want to nurture the change, we have to appreciate our role models and we have to thank them. First, to make it safe for them to keep being awesome, and secondly, to inspire other people who might be on the fence to try and emulate them. All right. We often find that the sprint review gets goes down a rabbit hole because people start asking a lot of questions. And we can't answer all of the questions inside the sprint review. So we need to give people some pre-read or post-read so that if this sprint review piques their curiosity, they can go off after the sprint review and then give them some self-help resources so they can learn more about the product so that they don't derail the next sprint review and they come prepared with more context, all right? And finally, the most important is, what do we do next? We have to figure out what are the course corrections that we need to, we need to make going forward, because that is the single most important purpose of the sprint review, the adaptation. When we're talking about appreciation, there's a really great comment from Pete. When we're talking about who should we thank, it's not just about people inside the sprint. There could be stakeholders, there could be interdependent teams. We stand on the shoulder of giants. There could be people all around the organization in the ecosystem who are helping this team succeed. As Pete rightly mentioned, let's appreciate them. Pete was suggesting infrastructure. Infrastructure is a crucial team. You may have security. Let's make sure that those who are nurturing the flame of agility, let's appreciate them, whether they are inside or outside the team, all right? So these are the top 10 reasons that we have found that sprint reviews suck. So what do we do about it? The first thing that we do to our clients is we give them a slide deck which they can use to guide their sprint review, okay? And the agenda of the slide deck tries to address all of these top 10 reasons, right? So you start with an introduction, you create a working agreement, or you share a working agreement about how we are expecting people to behave. You provide some product context, and then you explain how does this sprint fit into the product context, the roadmap context. Then you go into the demo. So notice that we've done a lot of legwork before we pull up the features, right? Then you take a pause and you elevate the context and you start looking at product trends across multiple sprints to see what is the market telling us and how might we learn about what is and what is not working to course correct, all right? We talk about impediments. We talk about who needs to do what by when to help us deliver more value. We talk about risks and risk management. We appreciate the people who are supporting us. We give them some references for the post-read or the pre-read for the next sprint review. And then we make sure that we don't leave the conversation without some concrete ideas about what adjustments should we consider in the next sprint planning, all right? So this is a quick flow. One thing we've seen, which is like magical, we've done this with companies from 5 Scrum teams to 21 Scrum teams. The beauty is, once you start having consistency, stakeholders, as they go from one sprint review to another, they start noticing there is a way of being, there is consistency across Scrum teams, and then the organization falls into a rhythm, and you spend less time teaching people what is a sprint review and more time in making sure the sprint review is valuable because there is consistency across different teams. So it's like a well-oiled machine, all right? So we usually talk about the intro. So if you look at the top bar of the slide, one of our customers came up with this really cool idea where they showed some kind of breadcrumbs along the top so the stakeholders can understand where we are in terms of the overall agenda of the sprint review. So we had one product owner who started with the Scrum framework and explained to the stakeholders, where are we with respect to the overall Scrum framework? We are in the sprint review. We're going to show you a demo of the increment. We're going to get your feedback, and that feedback is going to go into the sprint retro to make us better. And it's going to go to the product backlog, and we're going to take both data points into sprint planning and improve and course correct, all right? It helps to humanize the team. So tell people who are the people who did the work, give the team, have the team pick up a good name that inspires them, that represents them. Let's talk about what we need from our stakeholders. We need psychological safety so we can speak the truth. We need to provide feedback, direct feedback to each other. make decisions right now instead of kicking it down the road, and hold each other accountable. And let's not use a sprint review to weaponize the past, but let's use it to improve the future, right? So give them a sneak peek about what's going to happen. So we're going to share our work. We're going to give you a forecast, like the weather forecast. We're going to tell us what's getting in the way, what are some risks, where we need your help. And then we're going to pause and we're going to listen. You tell us, what do you see that we don't see? What are our blind spots? How are we going to impact the business? If you have an idea about a high value feature, awesome. We had this client where the CEO came with all kinds of cool features in the sprint review. And because he's the CEO, when he comes up with a feature, everybody's nodding their head. Yeah, that's a great feature, Jimmy. Awesome feature. What's the problem? The problem is Jimmy leaves the sprint review thinking that because a bunch of people in the room nodded, now that is part of the roadmap, in addition to everything else that was already part of the roadmap. Jimmy did not realize this is a zero-sum game. You can't keep adding more expectations from the Scrum team, right? Without swapping something that is less valuable out. So we try to set the stage up front. Look, we love new ideas. If you think something is more valuable, awesome. But for every item that you propose we add, give us a suggestion on what you think we should subtract, because it's a zero-sum game, all right? And let's have skin in the game. You are a stakeholder. We need you to help us remove our impediments and help us manage our risks, okay? And so we're going to have this conversation, and before we leave, let's together discuss as a unit, how will we improve our product, how will we improve our forecast, our plan, and how will we improve our ecosystem, our culture, processes, and tools, all right? So give them a sneak peek. This is like a micro training. Realize that many stakeholders may not have the time or inclination to attend any training on Agile or Scrum. That's okay. Let's give them just enough detail, just in time. Let's do just in time micro training, all right? So we gave them a sneak peek. Now let's talk about commitments versus forecast. So in the creators of the Scrum Guide intentionally remove the word commitment when it in the context of forecasting and replace it with forecast. A lot of executives, especially in publicly traded companies, are familiar with the safe harbor disclosure. I think the Securities and Exchange Commission that has mandated that if you are a publicly traded company, or if you're trying to get money from an investor, you have to tell them that whatever your business plan, whatever projections you're making in your business plan, these are not guarantees. This is to protect investors who may not be very savvy from getting manipulated by predatory companies, predatory organizations. So most executives are familiar with these kind of disclosures, because if they don't put these disclosures in their financial statements, they'll go to jail. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to take a page out of the book of financial reporting, and we are trying to modify the statements to tell them, look, there's a lot of uncertainty in software delivery, just like there's uncertainty in sales forecasting and weather forecasting. So we are going to be making a lot of forecasts here, and we're going to be transparent about lots of risks that could make these forecasts become unreliable. And also, what we promise you is, between sprint reviews, if something happens that has a material impact on the forecast, we are going to inform you ASAP, so you're not blindsided at the last moment. So here, we do not want to be snake oil salesmen trying to tell powerful executives what they want to hear, to paint a rosy picture that everything is going to go swimmingly, everything is going to go exactly as planned. Life doesn't work this way, all right? So what do we need from you, stakeholders? We promise we're going to be honest. Can you make it safe for us? If you come up with a new idea, tell us what other low value idea can be swapped out. We promise we will learn from our mistakes. If we promise you we're going to do something better, we'll do it. Can you hold us accountable? And finally, we promise to be vulnerable. We'll share our challenges. Can you promise to help us remove our impediments? There are some things which are outside our sphere of control. All right, so let's agree on the working agreement. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about the product context. So one of our clients started, the product owner started talking about their product vision. Then it was a $billion company. They had many business units. They explained to stakeholders, how does our product vision tie to the business unit or the department vision? We were using Nexus. We had Nexus Plus actually, so there were many departments. And then finally, how does the department vision tie into the company vision, right? So we are laying the groundwork for the sprint, right? Humanize your personas. So I just took some personas from our Agile for Patriots, but the problem is we have no empathy for the human beings we exist to serve. And if you don't provide empathy, it's just the conversation is just about bits and bytes and features, but not about human beings. So establish empathy with the human beings you're trying to serve. And now tie your sprint goals to the specific persona that you are trying to serve. So one of my best product owners used to start the story with the word imagine. So imagine there is a persona. They are trying to accomplish an outcome. Suddenly something happens, an event happens. Now this persona needs to respond to this event. They're trying to accomplish some outcome. That's the outcome that we are trying to help this persona accomplish through our sprint goal. So our sprint goal was blah, right? So provide context in terms of a human being. And now from this point on, you have established the context of the sprint goal, use that sprint goal to tie back the conversation to multiple levels, all right? So we have some financial goals for our product. Explain how the sprint goal is going to achieve the wildly important goal of your product, your business unit, and your company. We have a strategy for our product. Explain how your sprint goal is going to execute on this strategy. We have a business model. Tie back your sprint goal to the business model. Which element of the business model is it connecting with? And now let's talk about the roadmap context. So Steve, I think at this point, I would like your help in taking over. So I will stop sharing, and would you be comfortable taking over from this point?
Sure.
All right, so I will stop the share.
Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So we should be looking at the roadmap context. All right. So at this point, I think it's always good if we're looking at the big picture and we're trying to, again, give people context of what, not just saying, okay, well, we got these 3 features done in this sprint. So what? How does that fit into our overall roadmap? How are we doing on our overall roadmap? So the next item in the agenda is looking at that. So generally, it's really important to have your rolling 12-month roadmap and to have a vehicle by which you can show that and explain that to the stakeholders. And this is a form that we have used with good success in the past, where we show different release goals, we show it on the calendar, and we show our sprint goal graphically here and where we are, and then we are able to speak to how that sprint goal is getting us closer to meeting the next release goal. So this is one point that we can look at here. The next data point is, how does it support our release plan? So if we have all of our release goals spread out over the next rolling 12-month window, then we can see how this sprint goal is not only helping us meet the next release goal, but it is an integral part of the overall release plan. So again, as Robbie's been saying, providing context, not just of what's happened in the last 2 weeks, but where are we in terms of the big picture. This is like, you know, you're in the middle of a forest and you climb a tree to see the horizon and see where we're going, and not just where the next tree is. So a couple of things, and these are kind of optional slides, but they can be very critical in certain circumstances. How is this product, or how does the sprint goal impacting our architecture? And you might say, well, if we've got stakeholders and executives in our sprint review, maybe we don't want to get into product architecture, because that might bring up visions of really detailed diagrams and things that executives might not be interested in. And it doesn't have to be that detailed, but it's important to talk about the architecture because to give you a great example, we had a situation where a sprint team is going through several sprint reviews, never talks about the architecture. Turns out that there was a major disconnect between the executives who thought this sprint team was working on a particular component of the architecture, and the sprint team thought a different sprint team was working on this very component. So to at least do a high-level diagram of what your architecture is and who's working on what and how this sprint goal or this sprint increment fits into the overall architecture, sometimes it's a very important thing to look at. So keep that in mind. Deployment. How does the sprint goal impact our deployment? A lot of times, these kind of issues run into security. For instance, if a team decides to use a component, they download the component, they integrate it as part of their development efforts. The component needs access to an external URL in order to run correctly. We get to deployment and we find out that our security group is not willing to give access to this external URL. That's a really important thing to know, and it would be great to know that well before when we get to the point of releasing 2 to 3 months in the future. It's really important to know things about deployment and about live operations well in advance. So here's another opportunity that you might want to discuss. Again, probably won't discuss this in every sprint review at every company, but it's certainly something you want to keep in mind. So now that we have set the stage by talking about context and by talking about how it fits into the overall product and how it fits into the roadmap, now we get to the product demo. One of the common things that I have seen is we get to this point in the sprint review and we just jump in and start demoing screens and features, and nobody really knows where we just jumped in, and the context of what the demo is showing people is sometimes not really clear at all. So it's really important before you start jumping into the demo, talk about what you're going to do. Talk about what you're going to show and why. Here's a technique that, again, another technique that's in the sprint review playbook that Robbie mentioned. You might want to review what the definition of done is, and you might want to review what items did we forecast to get done, and compare that with what was done, what wasn't done, what got in the way. I can hear an objection of saying, well, you know, if we forecast 7 things to get done, 7 items to get done, and only 3 of them got done, I'm not sure I want to highlight that in the sprint review. But I would say that's exactly what you want to highlight in the sprint review. This is inspection, and this gives you an opportunity for adaptation. Why did you forecast 3 items or 7 items and only 3 of them got done? Could be process problems, could be environment problems, could be impediments that we're waiting on the stakeholders to remove. So this is a really important slide to give an overall view of what did we think we were going to do and what did we actually do. But also a good idea or a good opportunity to talk about definition of done, to review what definition of done means, and to see if we have indeed met definition of done. So in our organization, just having something working in a dev environment is not done. We've got to have it actually approved by the PO, meeting all enterprise definition and ready for deployment to production. So those are important things to continue to show, because I've been in the middle of sprint reviews where everything looks great in demo, but it can't be deployed for various architectural and DevOps reasons. And so, you know, it literally has no incremental value to the product at this point because we can't deploy it. So another thing that, another technique that we've seen is showing in this slide who's going to demo what. And again, it just gives people context, because one of the things you really don't want to do is just jump into a demo and have people spend the first 5 minutes of the demo not really concentrating on what you're showing them, concentrating on, well, wait a minute, where are we? What are we doing? How does this affect me? What's going on? So again, the context of a demo is really important. All right, so now we're ready to do a demo, and we do the demo. And I think most people are comfortable with doing the demo. Again, emphasizing do the demo in an overall big picture context. Once you've done that, here are some really critical things to think about and to get feedback on after the demo is done. Ask your stakeholders, what do you think? How's it impacting our business goals? Do we have any blind spots? So we've done a great demo. We think we've done a great feature. For whatever reason, and the communication can break down anywhere in the chain. Maybe we didn't understand what the stakeholders wanted. Maybe the stakeholders didn't clearly define it. Maybe what the stakeholders wanted has changed. But here's a place where we can look at our blind spots and we can get feedback. What kind of risks and unintended consequences should we watch out for? And how would you like us to improve? So what are things you would like to see us improve on? But more, just as importantly, how are you going to help us? This is always turn it back to the stakeholders of how can you help us help you? It's a team effort. So that's product demo feedback. So we've done the product demo. We've set it up into the context of the product and the roadmap. And now we get to product trends. Again, another big picture view of how is the product trending. And this is where we're going to jump through this fairly quickly because, as Ravi mentioned, this is a sequel to the previous meetup that we did, where we went through this in depth, talking about the various types of metrics we can measure, the various types of graphs that would show us how the product is trending. But I will reiterate that we see 4 different areas where we should always be going through the empiricism process. One of these is just culture. How is our culture supporting Agile and Scrum? The next base, building on the base of culture, we have quality. How are our quality metrics looking? How is the product trending? Are we building up a tremendous amount of technical debt? Are we rushing through deploying features and then having to go back and do a lot of rework? Delivery, how is our flow? Have we optimized or minimized the time to market for a feature in a release? And then finally, what value are we representing, or what value are we delivering to our stakeholders? And if you look at the pyramid, as we like to call it, value is the ultimate. That's the ultimate goal of what our sprint increment is. But value is the top of a pyramid that's based on a foundation of the proper culture, emphasis on quality with a good approach, and feedback mechanisms on quality, emphasis on delivery. And then finally, if you have all of these things working at an optimum pace, you're going to present value to your clients and to your stakeholders. So just some of the things that make up these 4 levels of the pyramid. Culture, it's empiricism, servant leadership, and self-organization. The basic building blocks of Agile and basic building blocks of Scrum that have to be in place in order to be able to effectively implement Agile and Scrum. Quality, setting good targets, coming up with a good approach to reach our quality targets and executing on that approach. Delivery, how good are we at forecasting? How are we forecasting? How can we improve on forecasting? Once we've set a forecast, what's our flow within the sprint? And then how well are we doing at releasing incremental value into the product with every sprint? And then finally, with value, we're looking at our value targets and our approach to achieving those value targets. So again, we're gonna really rush through this because we have limited time. And again, I would refer you to the recording of our other meetup, in which we go through each and every one of these quality trends, development trends, everything in depth. The most important thing here would probably be what are the top root causes of unacceptable quality and how are we going to address those? just as an example. Flow trends, probably the most important thing here is what are the biggest root causes of delays, and again, how can we address those root causes? So how quickly can we go from active to done? And how can we improve? Again, all of these charts and all of these areas are just ways to go from where are we now and how can we get better. And of course, this is something that a lot of times we don't see in sprint reviews. We forget about the value. How is the market responding to it? And it may take more than 1 or 2 sprints to get a significant amount of market feedback and to see how it's affecting our bottom line, to see how it's affecting our wallet share and customer transactions. But pretty quickly, you should be, if you're delivering value with every sprint, pretty quickly you should start to see some impact on these value type metrics. And it's really important to tie every feature, every increment, every deliverable out of the sprint into how is it affecting our value trends. And then our culture trends, also a very important thing to review in a sprint. Things like what kind of employee satisfaction, stakeholder satisfaction, partner satisfaction, servant leadership, how are our impediments? Are we just continuing to build up a backlog of impediments and not getting any kind of resolution on those impediments? How long does it take on average to remove an impediment? This is where we're inspecting not the product value, but the process value. And again, giving feedback on how that's going. So that is, again, let me say one more time, we have an entire meetup devoted to item 6, which are product trends, building effective metrics, presenting effective metrics, and I would suggest you refer to that if you haven't already seen it. So then, once we get to product trend or past product trends, we go into risks and impediments. So what's slowing us down and what can get in our way and how can we address these things? We generally recommend in our sprint playbook, our sprint review playbook, that you use a chart something like this, which defines on here what risks are, what impediments you're seeing, what kind of impediment it is, do a summary of what it is, the impact, is it high, medium, low, what's the business impact, and what's our approach to solving this. And we suggest continuing to leave these impediments up from sprint review to sprint review. So you can see that if we had an impediment last sprint review, and now we still have that impediment. Again, it's just kind of an impetus to discuss why are we not able to reduce this impediment and what can we do in order to get this off of our list so we don't have to keep looking at it by the time we do another sprint review. Once we've done the risk and impediment section, one very underutilized aspect of a sprint review is the appreciation section. Who do we thank? And again, it can be people who have worked hard within our team, and it can be people who are not within the team. If we've gotten significant help from another team, or if we've gotten significant help from the stakeholders, make sure people understand how important it is that everybody's pulling together for a common purpose. And if someone's done a great job for us, internally or externally, call that out. Let people know what has been done and who's really doing good work for us. Then finally, as you get into sprint reviews, and particularly if you get an audience that's fairly consistent, there's going to be some material that you're not going to want to review every time in the sprint review. And there's also usually, or definitely, not enough time to go over everything of value that you would have in a typically maybe 2-hour sprint review. So one way you can address this is reference materials, where you can tell your audience that if you have any additional questions about our product vision, who our personas are that we're developing this product for, what our business model is, what our architecture is, what our backlog is. All of these things should be clearly spelled out in documentation that's easily available for participants in the sprint review who can go and get more information on their own. And then finally, at the end of the sprint review, and we've had opportunities and encouraged feedback all along, but we want to end the sprint review with a formal opportunity to discuss how we can improve the product. As Ravi said, what the increment that we have delivered with this sprint review may generate ideas for additional features. So let's have a discussion on how we can improve the product. We can have a discussion on how we can improve our forecast, how we can improve our ecosystem. So all of these are important, and this is an opportunity here for stakeholders to give their feedback, and for the team to give their feedback, and for everyone to have open and transparent communication. All right. So Ravi, you want to take back and do a recap and bring us to a conclusion here?
Yes. Thanks, Steve. So I'm going to take the share. While I'm doing Thanks, Steve. So while I'm doing that, I want to share, I want to respond to some awesome questions. Are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So Aditya asked a really great question. How can we use this risk slide to create a risk or impediment slide to create urgency, to create an impetus or a motivation for stakeholders to respond, to help the team? This is hugely important. We've been in many companies where when we talk about impediments, the answer I got from an executive is, I'm doing really work. I'm doing real work, right? And what is all this BS? You're talking about agile, it's all BS. I'm trying to close $1 million deal, or I'm trying to prevent $1 million customer from leaving us. So I don't have time for this Scrum BS. So in the risk and impediments slide, if you don't tie it back to what's in it for me, how does it tie to what I care about? If you don't talk about customer names or financial impact or regulatory impact, the stakeholder has zero incentive to listen. And the second is, we recommend that you specifically call out a human being who needs to do what by when, and what is the business impact if it doesn't happen. If you don't create this sense of urgency, as Aditya was mentioning, everybody leaves the room thinking someone else is going to fix the problem doesn't get fixed, and sprint review is nothing more than an opportunity to beat up on the team, but no opportunity for servant leadership, for leaders to look in the mirror and ask the question, what can I do better? How am I causing this undesirable outcome? So Aditya, thank you for that very powerful question. All right, so guys, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is not a training session. We don't have enough time to go deep into every single element that we presented here. If any of this resonated with you, then please contact us. You want more information, you want us to help you, we could help you reboot your Scrum team, or we could help you launch your Scrum team if you're at the beginning stages of your Scrum adoption. We can also help you with our product owner playbook and our bootcamp. As we approach the end of this session, we just have a few minutes. I just want to recap what are the top 10 reasons why sprint reviews suck. And I want to get some thoughts, leave with some feedback from you folks. What is your biggest takeaway from this session, and what is one action you might take to make your sprint reviews suck just a little bit less? So I'll give you just a few seconds, and I'll be monitoring the answers. What is the biggest adaptation or course correction you will do in your context as a result of this session to make sprint reviews suck just a little bit less? All right, I got a question from Hugh. What are some of the tools that Steve and Ravi recommended using as a new Scrum Master? For example, the slide with the rolling 12-month roadmap. that created by the company or by the Scrum Master? So we created that slide. There were some elements like adding the strategy, the strategic pillars along the swim lanes. That may have come from one of the product owners, but the overall framework, that's something that we created, and it was also inspired by what we learned in the Scrum.org PSPO course. All right. What is your biggest takeaway? What is one action you will take as a result of this? Okay, Aditya's answer is to create a flow that can be followed and used to inspect and adapt without creating a stagnancy. All right, thank you, Aditya. Maybe a few more answers. What is your biggest takeaway? How will you apply this to make your company successful? All right, Hugh says, connect with the Scrum team with empathy and understanding. Very good. Create empathy for your Scrum team and create empathy for your personas, create empathy for your stakeholders. All right. Okay, Pete says, use this agenda to address the issues that were raised. And Sarah says, don't make the sprint review a code review. That's very important. The stakeholders should not be looking at bits and bytes and database schema in XML. You've got to elevate the conversation to a business context. How will this tie back to the personas, the vision, the operational and financial metrics? All right, friends, I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for your engagement. I hope that you found this useful. If you have any more questions, connect with us and look at all the free content that we have on our website. Follow us on LinkedIn. So as we roll out new content, announce new events, you are plugged in. So with that, I want to thank you all. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay sane and happy during these challenging times. Keep calm and scrum on. Thank you.